Good morning, Gamecock fans. Today is Friday, August 15th. I had to check the date there. And this is the year of our Lord 2025. This is Coffee with JC Shurburtt. Pleased to be with you this morning as we wrap up the week. Been an interesting week on the technical end. Apologize for yesterday's episode getting out late. I'm still kind of working through the whole multi computer thing with one of them being new and iCloud did not cooperate. I got the podcast version up because the audio file was ready to roll. And YouTube, for those of you out here on YouTube, appreciate that audience as well. Certainly, sorry that it was late yesterday, but a good episode nonetheless. Good episode of the show yesterday with the smorgasbord and Alex Jones. We have Matt Anderson, the late night Gamecock, on today. The morning show rolls at 10. And then this morning, a nice day here on Chief Sports Network. Launching a new show for those of you that love South Carolina high school football. We all do. We all have our teams and alma maters, and it's always exciting when the season kicks off. Four-quarter Friday with Justin Hall and Steve Hall will debut on the Chief Sports Network live at 9, streaming on YouTube, X. The X account's at Chief Sports Net. It'll also stream on the Big Spur and all of our normal X channels that we stream shows on. But check that out. Today we have the Gilbert High head coach. We have the James Island head coach and the South Florence head coach on today to talk a little bit about their respective programs. And of course, South Florence. You want to listen to their coach because I'm sure Lenore Sellers will come up if you're a Gamecock fan. Jaden Sellers too, because he's been having a very good camp. Download the Chief Sports app for complete high school football coverage this year. The scoreboard bug, you can check out your scores. If you are an out of area high school football fan, maybe you live in another part of the state or you live out of state and you're a Spartan High fan, Dorman, Burns, Chesney, Landrum, a lot of the Spartanburg County schools, and then Myrtle Beach, Conway, you can stream their games live on the Chief Sports app. It's available on the Apple App Store, also on Google Play, so you can check that out. It's really convenient. I listen to the Burns games all the way to where I'm at and check out the other games too live on the Chief Sports app. So check that out as well. We're trucking away. Second scrimmage is this weekend for the Gamecocks. That's kind of where the pedal hits the metal, so to speak, whatever analogy you want to use. I think I've used about 20 of them this week. It's the most important scrimmage. They'll tell you they used to scrimmage 3 times. John Strickland was talking about this back in the Holtz era, and what they do, I think, and I don't have like the day by day details or anything of that nature to kind of go through it all with you, but what they're going to do next week, school starts, so classes in session. So you start getting into what you call your routine. Like up until that point in preseason camp, that's what I call it camp. It's all football. You're in there in the mornings, you're in there doing walkthroughs in the afternoon, you're meeting, you're eating together. There's no school. So it's all football. And the term camp kind of originated back in the day. You've seen the Junction Boys, Bear Bryant famously when he was at Texas A&M. They were a little soft, and he took them out in the middle of nowhere, practiced on gravel and things like that. The pros still do it. I mean, that you have training camps, not in the cities that they or not at the team headquarters. That changes. The Panthers obviously used to come to Wofford and Spartanburg, and that doesn't happen. So it's I remember the Falcons trained at Furman for a while. It just kind of it's one of those things. It's not as common as it used to be, but it's still out there. And it's like a camp. You go and work on football all day, just like when you're a kid and you went to basketball camp. You played basketball all day. That was fun. I loved going to basketball camp. Like 4 games in a day. It was exciting. Um, and so that's kind of the gist of it. And that's why they call it camp now at South Carolina. Obviously, they just hang out at the facility in the indoor. That's why you build a facility like that. It's ready made for those types of situations. But it's all football. Second scrimmage happens. school starts, and then you get into your game routine. So what the Gamecocks do, like I said, I don't have the exact details, but Beamer has mentioned it a couple times. They did it a couple years ago. They'll go through a game week simulation, and the third scrimmage, they probably go maybe half the plays they normally do. Some of it maybe not even be live. But what they do, they get into the game week routine. In other words, you're, going to class, you have your normal Friday, Monday practice, Tuesday practice, all that walkthrough. Gamecocks open on Sunday this year, so the day off may change for this week. And then, folks, the next week it's on. It's full go. They'll probably start looking at Virginia Tech here shortly after that second scrimmage because the first item of business obviously is personnel and getting your roster depth chart, special teams, assignments ready to go. You have to decide who you're going to travel for road games. And yeah, it changes week to week. I think you're only allowed 74, 75 for SEC road games. But it's just one of those things, it's a process and it's a great process. We all love it. We all like to see how it unfolds. And like we talked about yesterday on the show with Alex, there's some position battles that are still raging, and I think it's a good thing. Competition makes everybody better. We talked yesterday about how a lot of the positivity coming out, from the program, you kind of don't know what to think about it. And it's practice. So even if they're having a really good camp and a really good practice, that doesn't always impact the outcome of the game. I would rather have questions answered than not, because that's what good teams have. But or have multiple answers, as is the case with some of these position battles. And then you just go and, hey, if your answers are not as good as the other team's answers and you don't win, that's just how the cookie crumbles, right? You kind of just get better and do the best you can and go recruit. And recruiting's kind of the broader topic here. I was listening to Peter Burns, and a great interview with Peter and Jamie Bradford. By the way, it's up on our YouTube channel. He's a he's a guy I can listen to. Some of the folks out there I can't listen to. He's one that I can. I think he's really, really good. He has kind of a Mike Morgan style approach to things. Very affable, is honest about things, and but really good to listen to. And I'm glad Jamie had him on, and that is up on our YouTube channel, by the way. So I was listening to that the other day, and Peter started in on the Gamecocks, and he was like, "Well, what I would like for them to do, what I want South Carolina football to be, is to be on the cusp of the playoff again and not miss a beat." He's like, "But you look at the personnel losses, and you lose all these players, and like your top, he said top 32 tacklers. He was being facetious and funny, but they did lose 7 of the top 10 tacklers." And he's like, "I love Clayton White, but you kind of wonder about it." And that's kind of what most people say. Um, even Gamecock fans, how are you going to replace these players? And the answer to that is recruiting. Um, in recruiting nowadays is different because of the transfer portal. Recruiting nowadays is, a little bit harder to discern because it's not just the top recruiting teams. Georgia's signed what, a top 2 class the last few years, and there are experts out there. I don't know that I'm buying it. Maybe I am, maybe I'm not. I need to see Georgia play because they do have some awfully talented guys. But you listen to Kirby Smart in the spring, and he's kind of concerned about some of the stuff that was going on. And as far as just the standard there, Georgia, the one thing Kirby did at Georgia, he set a new standard. Hey, it's not good enough to go 10-3. Georgia needs to be up there with everybody else. I think a lot of people around college football have thought that for 30 years about Georgia. And he's the one that did it. That's hard to do, by the way. But is to get it that next level. That's that door you got to kick in that I was talking about yesterday. But Georgia is recruited up there, but yet they're going to be awfully young this season. They lost some players. They lost some players to the portal. They had to get players from the portal. They got a new quarterback. They had to kind of rebuild the receiving room. Running back, for whatever reason, at that school is a question. Although Frazier's a good, capable back, and they hope he does well. There's no guarantee, right? They don't have Nick Chubb coming back. That's proven. So, you don't look at Georgia like you did Saban, Alabama, or those teams Kirby had a few years ago and say, oh, they're just going to keep right on rolling. That's just, and I mean, they may win the playoff. They may win the national championship, but you don't know. There's not proven talent coming back. They have to replace players. And the Gamecocks are no different than that. The issue with South Carolina is there's not the track record there of just reloading. Um, Although I've said many times, 2011 to 2012, the Gamecocks lost Melvin Ingram and Stephon Gilmore and Antonio Allen, three of their best players on defense. The 2012 defense, there's nothing wrong with that defense, right? So, and you had guys that stepped up and emerged and played their best football, and that's what this team has to do this year. But so the answer to Peter Burns, you know, a question and a lot of other questions in the national media is recruiting. I mean, you have to recruit well. We think South Carolina has recruited well. If you look at the players that are stepping in to replace the guys from last year, they all have something to like, you know, either on paper or when you dive into it a little more. Sure, there's some question marks, and there's some guys that, again, need to play their best football. But in college football, that's what happens. You replace talent with talent. That's what good programs do. And it's like I said, at some point they have to do it. So this is why there's hope, right? Um, if you kind of dig into it, now you got to prove it. Obviously, the Peter Burns of the world, and then the other people that probably don't take the time to look into it like Peter does. You got to prove it on the field, and here in 16 days, that's when it starts against Virginia Tech. But recruiting, that's the answer as to why there's hope that things will continue to be good for South Carolina football, and there's anticipation. Because about Lenore Sellers and Dylan Stewart and Jalen Kilgore, um, and some of these other guys, Judge Collier. There's enough back that is proven to feel okay, and you just build around that. And it's the other guys people have concerns about. And, it on paper, honestly, for South Carolina's football program, I had somebody tell me the other day, and he hadn't dug into the roster or anything, but he knows his history and knows, kind of how every program trends. It's just mission impossible to lose that much talent at South Carolina and then in the SEC come back, you know, and be the same. That said, uh, I think when you have good players and the way you combat that is through recruiting. And like I said, I think they've recruited well. I think there's a track record there of recruiting pretty well. If you look at last year's team and you look at kind of at certain spots, how players have gotten better as they've been in the program and stepped up. I mentioned Judge Collier, so he goes from a freshman that's promising that, sees some action kind of on a thin defense to last year, a starter. Some people thought Vakari Swain would, because Vakari was ranked higher out of high school, would beat him out. Vakari did not. He played a lot, though. Some people thought O'Donnell Fortune would not start. He did, played a lot, played well at corner. So he got better. Judge had a good year last year. Now, this year, he's expected to take an even bigger step. I mean, there's talk about him being all SEC. And so there's that component of it, that's an example of a player that's gotten better that, hey, maybe heading into last season, Judge Collier was somebody we talked about, the cornerback position after losing Dial. And, you got Judge Collier and O'Donnell Fortune, who's kind of his turn to start, and Swain. And, everybody, because Swain was ranked higher, was hoping Swain would go out there and do it. Swain had a good year, and he's going to have a good year this year. But the other guys were pretty damn good too. So, that's the thing. And I could sit here and talk about, Demetrius Knight and Kyle Kennard and the 1 year portal guys they got, but you've heard that. I mean, you know that. You've heard Beamer talk about how a coach told him Demetrius Knight couldn't play there. Um, you've heard him talk about Kyle Kennard, Georgia Tech was not upset that he went, but he had some things that were pretty, it was all about discipline and things like that. And Sterling Lucas got the most out of him. Now, when that happens, coaching staffs can't get arrogant. You can't just go get anybody that, like you can't have the NFL arrogance. And I don't think this staff at South Carolina does. But you can't just sit there and go, oh, this guy, he can't play dead in the movie. But guess what? We're going to get the most out of him and we'll win with him. That gets into a whole like different level of, you can get beat that way. But I don't think these guys have because you kind of look at like the who of it, like which players are they hoping to get better, and there's a lot to work with there. And so we'll find out. I mean, this is a big test this season to see if that can continue. If that does continue, South Carolina's in really good shape, folks, because that means that every year they can go and pick and choose and find their guys and put it together and avoid drop offs, which is which happens. I mean, Missouri last year, a lot of people were thinking they were a top 10 team. Brady Cook's injury situation, gosh, he got hurt again in the pros. Had a little to do with that, but not really. I mean, I don't. Missouri was 10-3. There are some games they should have lost. Probably some games they should have won too. South Carolina was that one, but should have lost to Oklahoma. Should have lost to Vandy. Could have lost to Boston College. Could have lost. Definitely should have lost to Auburn. But they got through and got 10-3. It was a get through year. And then Missouri now is not picked high in the league, but they're planning on having a good year, and their schedule certainly sets up. Its schedule was a part of Missouri's success last year. Don't get me wrong. But if you think about the preseason last year, Missouri was in a lot of playoff predictions, right? Because they went 11-2 the year before. That was a drop off for them. Obviously, that team wasn't as good as the 11-2 team, especially when the 11-2 team hit its stride. But they still finished 10-3, and you regroup and keep going. South Carolina is going to avoid a drop off similar to Missouri last year. And, you can't have injuries and stuff like they had. But, these guys have to be replaced, and they got to step up and be good. And you recruit. That's the thing. So I think they've recruited well. This is why it's important to sign good players, both through the portal and out of the high school and JUCO ranks. So this is why you do it. Is so eventually when you lose your good players, you can pop other guys in there. This is why you have a great strength and nutrition program. This is why you have good position coaches. It's not college football as much as everybody wants to make it out to be the pros, and as much as some in the media want to act like five-star recruits and high school players straight out of high school in this sport are finished products and have all these, they attach all these expectations to them, I think, in some ways because they want to be right about the ranking or they want to promote the ranking, and that's fine too. I mean, I made a living doing that. But as much as they want to do that, it's still developmental. It's not the NFL. There's little development that goes on in the NFL because you'll have a guy at running back that you put on the practice squad a couple of years. Next thing you know, you're starting running back wants a lot of money. He's kind of worn down, so you're like, see ya. Practice squad guy comes in. Rico Dowdle, was an example of that. Worked his way up, developed in the NFL, stayed healthy. How about that? College football is where you develop in this sport. It's different than other sports. Gladiator sport. I talked about camp, preseason. Now you're training for the chance to go into the arena, so to speak. That's why it's a great sport. That's why you love it. It's just like you have such little time compared to the rest of the year to watch your team actually play. There's an intense focus on it, and that's why it's a great sport. But like I said, Rigo Dowdle is an example of developing in the NFL. But most of the time, you're close as close to a finished product as you can be. I mean, you have rookies that, first year, quarterbacks too. You may have a vet that you start and you bring your rookie along slowly, but by and large, those guys are at least going in, playing some, ready to go play grown man football at that level. College, it is not that way. And it never will be, no matter how much people want to make it that way, because it's not about money or the portal or free agency, or it's just like the pros or anything like that. It's about age of human beings playing the sport and the physical and mental development it takes to play the sport at a high level. That's not changed the last time I saw it, right? I mean, I read something stupid about they've invested NIL in this guy, so he should start. No, well, yeah. I mean, honestly, you're going to have to eat some NIL money. Some programs are going to have to do that if you want to win, because nobody's going to sit there and put up with that if you're playing some guy that's not worth a toot just because you're paying him. I can assure you that's not happening at South Carolina. Um, or most programs. But to say I mean, so it's not the NFL. NFL, you do that. You got a front office like, hey, you got to play your guy. So it's still developmental, and it always will be. And it's developmental at Georgia and Ohio State and all these other places, just like it is at South Carolina. You know why Michigan won the national championship in 2023? Player development. Yes, Michigan recruits great athletes. Compare their recruiting classes to Ohio State, who they beat in 4 straight years. It's not even close. Under Jim Harbaugh, that program really good. Also did a pretty good job of advanced scouting, I must say. The Wolverines. They're actually they got an NCAA thing coming out today. I wonder what will happen there. That's a very interesting situation. Gamecocks have a player they would like to flip committed to Michigan, a couple of them. So hope that the NCAA brings the hammer. Wouldn't it be great if today the NCAA brought the hammer down on Michigan, which I think they should, because when you cheat the game, I mean, all this money flowing everywhere, impermissible benefits, I don't care. Stupid Harbaugh got popped for texting players during COVID or having kids on campus during some kind of COVID violation. I don't care. I do not care. Harbaugh tells the NCAA to go to hell and goes to the NFL, gives them the middle finger. I don't care. Having a spy illegally scouting and stealing signals, that's cheating the game. You cannot do that. You can steal signals. That's not illegal. But you can't have somebody like he was on the sidelines at Central Michigan, Eastern Michigan, one of the directional Michigan schools. Unbelievable. Yeah, so to me, as far as the game goes, nothing against Michigan. I hope they pop them. From a Gamecock perspective, obviously, you've got some players committed there that you'd like to flip. Anyway, didn't mean to get sidetracked on that, but player development. That's why, and that starts with recruiting, because you can develop a guy all you want if he's 5'9", 210, plays linebacker, runs 5'1", and can't move laterally. Uh, what do you do? If you have slow guys, what do you do? Well, South Carolina has recruited well with speed and athleticism, so you don't have to worry about that. So you have to get the raw ability in there to mold it. The ingredients, so to speak. Bill King, my guy, we used to call our recruiting segments "shopping for the groceries." That's what you do, shopping for the groceries. Um, so I'm going to bring this up because it's not an apples to oranges, no pun intended, comparison. But I know you guys follow Clemson, and then Clemson kind of broke through, which is what South Carolina wants to do. So I mention it just as a point of comparison. Not trying to. I mean, this obviously is not a Clemson podcast here, but I'm gonna take you back to 2014. Clemson had been building. All right, before I say that, let me just say this. Do you know how many of the guys off Carolina's defense that were drafted this past draft, right? The big draft everybody's talking about. Yeah, how many of those guys were draft ready the previous year or really even uh I mean TJ Sanders a little bit on the radar. Uh but ready to go as the year before, none. Maybe Nick Emanware, maybe. But Nick started kind of coming into his own at the end of 2023. Big time pick against Clemson, and they moved it. He was struggled a little bit at nickel in some coverage situations, but really started coming into his own, and then was fantastic last year. TJ and Tonka, defensive tackles, everybody's worried about. They were woefully inconsistent. I've said that before. Best season last year. Um, Demetrius Knight obviously had his best season. So did Kyle Kennard. So, I mean, there's precedent for that uh, as far as South Carolina's concerned recently. But I'll talk about Clemson. 2014, Clemson has the best defense. They'd been building it under Venables. Remember when he got there, they weren't very good on defense. Sort of had to outscore teams. Still won a bunch of games in the ACC. But that 2014 defense, that's when they snapped the streak against the Gamecocks, and the D was ranked number one in the country. Couldn't really stop Georgia Tech. And Watson was a true freshman and got hurt and then came back, and he played with a torn ligament in his knee against the Gamecocks, and they won the game by, I don't know, just running that little receiver shovel pass, the whole or shuttle. Was it shovel pass? No, it's yeah, shovel pass. The whole game. Yeah, he got completions for that. That was a pass. I don't know why Lorenzo Ward couldn't figure that out. But anyway, tough day for the Gamecocks that day. But number one defense in the country statistically. I mean, they played really well. I remember they went to Orlando for a bowl and beat the crap out of Oklahoma. And they had some players coming back, but they lost two first rounders in Vic Beasley and Stephon Anthony. Grady Jarrett, who now plays for the Chicago Bears, who is one of the best defensive tackles in pro football. One of the biggest recruiting misses evaluation wise in my career at defensive tackle, because Carolina signed Phillip Dukes, and I think in that same class. Yeah, it was Shane Beamer's last class before he went back to Virginia Tech. So 11, 12, 12 or 11. Phillip Dukes was some Manning, okay player, kind of got in the rotation toward the end. Looked a lot better when I saw him in person. It just didn't project. I mean, didn't work out. I mean, I was wrong. And then Grady Jarrett was 5'11", and I was like, well, this guy, I don't know what they're thinking there. Well, it didn't matter. Grady Jarrett was outstanding, amazing. You know, hats off to them. I missed it. I was doing rankings at the time. So Grady Jarrett was a fifth rounder. The pros didn't even believe in him. And then Tony Stewart was a sixth rounder. So, and Stewart and Anthony were the two five-star linebackers that they had. And in their case, they got better as they kind of grew with that defense. But all of them were drafted, and so that's they lost two first rounders out off of their defense, including Vic Beasley, who was a holy terror off the edge, and Grady Jarrett, who was their big D tackle in the middle. But what were they doing? Recruiting, right? I think Christian Wilkins came in as a true freshman that year and played. And then so the next year in 15, when they made their move, Deshaun Watson was a second year starter, and they went undefeated, were ranked number one, and made it all the way to the national championship game. Lost 45-40. Well, what happened? Well, I mean, a lot of these guys that were on the team, started playing their best football for the and Shaq Lawson, low four-star guy from Daniel. He was kind of good from the get-go, but he had a big year, got drafted. Kevin Dodd was off the radar, just a take out of Riverside, ended up getting drafted. Mackenzie Alexander, obviously the secondary, was a big-time five-star recruit, got drafted. TJ Green, three-star kid from Alabama that they found and developed. He got drafted. BJ Goodson had one offer, linebacker from Lamar, South Carolina. He got drafted, started for them. DJ Reader, who's still in the pros, was a player that when they took him, a four-star guy out of North Carolina, is more of a big baseball player. And they were talking about moving him to offensive line, all this other stuff. The light came on the last year. Maybe Gabriel Brownlow Dindy, anybody? Not that this is his last year. The light came on the last year, and he's still playing NFL football. Now, I saw DJ Reader. I actually scouted him at his high school, doing rankings at the time, and there wasn't a more athletic guy, but just was not, just for whatever reason, took him a little while. And then Ron Curse, their big safety, back on the back end, high 3-star, low 4-star guy. Those were the guys that got drafted off of Clemson's defense after 15. So part of the number one defense for sure, but also, not a ton of highly recruited guys. Beasley, going back to it, sure, 2 5-stars got drafted off that defense, but Beasley and Jarrett were just 2 guys out of Georgia they took. And so my point in saying, and look, it's apples to oranges in some ways because you're in the ACC. That is a big deal. They did play Auburn that season, I think, to open the year, but it's not, it's a little bit different than having to go through the meat grinder the Gamecocks do, during that time. But there's some precedent. Clemson's defense, was it as good in 15 as it was in 14? Statistically, no. But were they a good defense? Yeah, man. I mean, remember when they played Oklahoma? The great Lincoln Riley was coordinating that offense. Oklahoma didn't see too many defenses, in the Big 12. Clemson beat them by 20, you know. So, national championship game, Alabama scored 45. I mean, like I said, was it a great? No, was it enough? Absolutely. Also you had Tony Elliott as a first year play caller, that year. So in my opinion, you know, just looking at them, and I use them as an example because I know you guys know about their personnel and all that, not trying to make you relive the mid 2010s at South Carolina. But yeah, like I said before, at some point, you got to do it, and you do it through recruiting. And I think South Carolina's recruited very well. And if you look at some of these guys, it's a mix of blue chip players and also evaluations. And South Carolina had that last year. T.J. Sanders, Tonka Hemingway was the highest rated one, was a low 4-star. TJ was a 3. Nicky Manware was a 3 for whatever reason. Demetrius Knight was a mid 3 quarterback. Kyle Kennard is just a guy, 84, went to Georgia Tech. So precedent wise, this program, a lot of South Carolina kids too has done well. Evaluation. I mentioned Judge Collier. There you go. That's another one from in-state. Just like B.J. Goodson, Kevin Dodd. The B.J. Goodson and Kevin Dodd. South Carolina didn't even look at them, right? And then when Clemson ended up winning the national championship, they had a lot of guys on the roster like that too. But like I said, it's the ACC, and so I don't know that it's totally applicable, but they won it all. They're good enough to beat Alabama the next year and all that good stuff. I mean, you play the schedule that you are assigned, and you do the best you can. I don't know what that Clemson team would have done in 15 against. I mean, heck, they beat Carolina by 5. I think the Auburn game was that Auburn? They start with Auburn that year. Maybe they didn't. Or was that was the year they started with App State and Wofford? Yeah, I don't think they had a big out of conference game. Oh well. The next year was Auburn, the national championship year. But I'm sorry for that. But so there's precedent up the road. That's kind of what Dabo did. He just kept recruiting. You celebrate a lot like Beamer. You celebrate the wins you got. All of Gamecock Nation was poo-pooing it because the Gamecocks had quite a winning streak going, and they just kept recruiting and kept filling holes, and eventually it worked out because they had a really good quarterback and enough pieces to make it work. Like I said, the SEC is different. The playoff era is different. 12-team playoff, all that is a lot different. College football is different than it was then. But as far as just like I said, the unshakable reality of the sport, which is what what it's all about, really. The unshakable reality of the sport hasn't changed. How do you, you know, look at the losses? And I think this is the last time I'm going to mention this because we're 2 weeks before the season. Those guys are in the NFL. Let's focus on what we got here, um, and all that. The reality is, how do you overcome the losses? Well, you recruit, and the Gamecocks have recruited. You also develop and all that. So, that's kind of just the how it's going to happen. Again, no guarantees. Like I said, college football is tough to predict. It could be a disaster. Could be really good. We'll know. We'll know. And then there'll be some things that we think we know after the first couple of weeks that change. You know how it is every single year. But I'll tell you this, I'll be right here on coffee every single day, Monday through Friday, talking about it. Certainly appreciate you joining me today. JC Shurburtt's coffee's over. I'm out. Check out Four Quarter Friday starting at 9. Also, we'll be back with the show with Phil, the Mad Dog, and the late night Gamecock himself, Matt Anderson. I'm out. Holla at you soon.
JC and Mad Dog Mully.